If you are seeking a relationship to fill a void, no. You cannot fill the void in yourself with somebody else.
Can I just pause that? That goes for anybody in any relationship, whether it's divorce or grief. Like, again, if you just come out of a relationship, even if it's just a normal relationship, you've been with your girlfriend, boyfriend for 3 years, do not try and fill that void with another person, because that is one of the biggest things that I find people do. So I just want to nip in there, because people do that, forget divorce and forget grief. People just do that and try and fill voids, and that's all they're doing. They're not actually addressing the void. They're just trying to fill it, and it never, ever, ever works. Welcome to the Prime Life Project podcast, a place to help you unlock your full potential, both mentally and physically, to become the best version of you. Welcome back to an episode of the Prime Life Project podcast. I'm your host, Daniel James, and today we are talking about grief. Now, it's a topic that we've spoken about before on this podcast in many different formats, but we haven't spoken specifically about love after grief, and that's what my guest is going to talk about today. He's got a very, very interesting story. I'm absolutely delighted to be talking to him. He's full of energy. I'm very excited to have him here. Richard, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, James. This is great.
So can you give me a bit of a background into what you actually do? So we're going to go into your story, but can you sort of give a bit of an introduction to my audience, sort of introduce yourself and what it is that you actually do?
Well, thankfully for the topic, this is exactly what I do, is I help people get clear about what good relationships look like and help them find a partner, help them find the love of their life after they've lost, kind of find their purpose and partner. So
I think that's a big thing when, like I said, we've sort of shared your story a little bit. We're going to go into more detail. I say you shared it with me off air, but we're going to share it with my audience. But I think that's a big thing when you've gone through that grieving process. Like, people can feel like they've lost their purpose a bit and kind of lost their way. Is that what you kind of find? We're going to talk about it in a second. Is that a common thing that you find with men, especially, that they basically had this amazing woman in their life, they lose their partner, and then they kind of feel they have no purpose?
Well, and let's be honest, any long-term relationship, I mean, we all have our roles to play and whatnot, and your identity does get tied in more and more. So when you lose somebody, you're not just losing the person, you're losing a part of your identity. You're taking on roles that some of which you didn't even really realize, And then, of course, there's the fact that, yes, you have to kind of grieve the life that you expected to live, and now that's not a possibility. So you actually kind of have to resolve that too. So it's all part and parcel.
I think you hit on a key thing there that, again, we've kind of discussed a little bit on the podcast before, but it's like grief isn't just the loss of a physical person, that you can grieve the loss of an idea as well. And I think that's kind of what hits people the hardest, because they feel like they've gotten over the loss of the physical loss. But then actually what then hit them is another wave of grief about things they hadn't expected, as you said, where maybe they were going to go on holiday and then that sort of hits them, and then that's that whole idea. Is that a common thing as well, that you find that people don't realize that grief is not just a physical loss? That's something that a lot of people struggle with.
Oh, I think that's wildly accurate. I think that there's a lot of it that people don't realize, kind of, that grief isn't just about the loss of the person. So yeah, no, I think I see it all the time, and I really, really, the grief goes so far beyond just the person, just that, it really is, you lose a part of your identity. There's a lot you have to grieve, and a lot you have to change, and kind of change mindset. And it's wildly important that you do so well.
We're going to talk about the mindset. We're going to dive into that. But yes, kind of just take my audience back a little bit. Could you sort of paint a picture of your sort of journey with grief? Obviously, we're not going to spend too much time here, because I want to talk about what you kind of do now, and like basically helping people through the other side. But I think it's important that my audience actually knows your story as well. So can you just give me a brief sort of overview of what happened with yourself and your story with grief?
So let's start at the beginning. I went to a Yule party, and I was invited, but my roommate was taking so long to change his party. It was crosstown, and I was just like, look, if you change costume, if you change your outfit one more time, there's no point in going. We're going to spend more time in transit than we will at the party. And we did spend more time in transit than we did at the party, but nonetheless. So I went to this party, and unbeknownst to me, there was a girl there named Samantha, and she was not originally invited. She was brought by a friend. And he wanted to bring another friend, but they weren't available, so he brought her, and we met and we saw each other, and it wasn't, oh my God, she's cute or whatever. We both had the same thought, and it's, oh, it's you. And that's kind of how it started. And from there, a couple of months later, because I had to go traveling and whatnot, and when I got back, I ran into her a couple of times at the college that she was attending, and I had a lot of friends there, so I was hanging out there quite a bit. And we met up, and we went out for a wonderful lunch, and then it led to other get-togethers, other dates, and so on. And then that was in the February, and then the May we decided, in May we decided, yeah, this is working. Let's, we're going steady.
Yeah.
That led to 10 years together. So that was in 98. And then in 2008, on New Year's Day, January 2008, we decided, but we'd intended to get married and all of this, and we tried, and nothing ever kind of fit, nothing ever kind of worked out. And on January 1st, 2008, we decided we're getting married August 8th, 2008. What a cool date. We're doing this. And everybody just kind of fell into place. Everybody just fell into line, and the family supported, and everybody kind of got together, and we made this happen. So we got married in August 8th, 2008. And then the January after was when she got her diagnosis. But we spent another 10 years together through all of that. And she passed away in 2018. So.
And what was the diagnosis that she got?
She got something very rare. It's a rare form of cancer called gastrointestinal stromal tumor, or GIST, as it's colloquially referred to. And it's interesting because it's not your traditional type of cancer. It is a gut cancer. And it doesn't treat, they don't treat it like they do a lot of cancers where they have chemo and radiation therapy in the hospital. It's a targeted treatment. You take a pill once or twice a day, depending on your dosage, depending on where you're at. And when she was diagnosed, it had already spread, so it was already stage 4. Mm-hmm. But they were like, no, you're going to take this, and what that pill effectively chokes out a protein that the cancer needs, straight up. So
she was able to last 10 years on stage 4. Was it like, was that what you were expecting, or were you expecting like another year? Like what was when she got diagnosed and you were told, right, you can take this tablet? Like, what was the actual outlook of that at the time?
Oh, the prognosis. Yeah, we always avoided the prognosis because honestly, and the people who were really in the know, and the thing about a really rare cancer is that all the doctors know each other, all the researchers know each other. It's a very small community. It's very tight. And they were like, you know what? There's no point in the prognosis because we don't know. It could be 3 years, could be 10 years, could be 20 years. We really have no idea because everybody responds to it differently, and there are different variations of it. Even within the rare cancers, there are rare variations of that. So how it responds to different treatments and whatnot. And she went through 3 lines of treatment. So you have the first line treatment eventually fails. They all fail eventually. You just don't know how long it's going to kind of run for. The second treatment was terrible, and then the third one kind of sort of did it, but we had other complications, and I could talk about that. But that's kind of how it went. So it was really something very, very specific.
So with not knowing, because I'm trying to figure out now when you talk about this, because obviously I know I deliberately stopped you when we spoke off air
yes.
about your story, because I didn't want to know, and I wanted to be in this moment right now, being like, right, actually, what would I be feeling? Because for me, actually, it was very much like this amazing relationship, and then you get hit with this tragedy. I'm trying to think, if I was Samantha, did she like the fact of not knowing, having a prognosis? Because I'm trying to think how I would deal with that. Because for me, I think I would kind of like to have a ballpark. Did she like that? How did it work with you as well? Like, what was that dynamic of not knowing?
We were very much about living with intention, and the idea about that was it's all guesswork in a white coat. When you really get down to it, it's a lot of guesswork. And I swear, even more so after that experience, there's a quote by Voltaire, which is, doctors prescribe pills of which they know little for conditions of which they know less to people of whom they know nothing. And it actually, and I don't want to downplay doctors, doctors really, they do try to do their best, but there's a lot we don't know. There's a lot that's really kind of out there and wild. And, what today's finality is tomorrow's possibility, because there could be a research that comes through or something else. So there was always kind of that hope. There was always that kind of, well, there is progress being made. There's little leaps, and there's prospects just over the horizon. There's always that possibility. So we rather kind of focus on, we're going to live the best we can, the most intentionally we can, during that time, instead of focusing on, oh, okay, 3 years, because that actually destroys your mindset too. Anthony Robbins, energy flows where the mind goes. So if you're thinking 3 years, well, self-fulfilling prophecies are a thing. So
that's what I was getting at. Like that's such
yeah,
an interesting thing. You said that. It's like, well, actually, if you know it's going to be 3 years, like then well, it could have been 5 years, but actually you've kind of self-fulfilled that it's going to be 3, and then you almost kind of give up on that 3rd year when actually you could have had, as you had another 8 years that you weren't expecting because you lived every single day with intention. I think the key word here that you mentioned is hope. I think that's such a powerful thing. And you look at, again, Viktor Frankl, when it goes to Auschwitz and stuff, it's a big thing about like hope. And again, just constantly having that, that what if, that possibility, and like the future does get better. Now, obviously, unfortunately, we know that Samantha, obviously, it did end, but it's actually the quality of those years, I imagine, as you said, living with intention and with hope, were a lot more fruitful than probably the 10 years before, I imagine, because you had more to live for.
well, yes, and so we did live with intention before, and there was always kind of the impetus to kind of make our mark on the world and do good things, and we decided that we wanted our mark on the world to be more from our merit rather than from having children and propagating the. We weren't very much for the kind of nuclear family traditional kind of way of doing things, and that's fine. But after the diagnosis, it was really funny talking about living with intention. Yes, it becomes very clear of. I have, very much like the medieval monks, memento mori, where we greet each other, remember your death. And the idea of, I don't have unlimited time. So, make the most of it. And talking about making the most of it, and this is to Sam's credit, after the diagnosis, she was like, I really always wanted to go back into art history and, do my degree in that. And I was like, well, go apply. And she was like, no, but the money and this. And I was like, we'll figure that out. Apply. Well, maybe, but no, go for it. And she did. And she wound up earning her master's degree before she wound up presenting her thesis and whatnot. And then she was not able to pick up her degree at the convocation, but she did get her master's degree in art history. So she went and got her bachelor's and her master's after diagnosis.
Wow.
So
and
just
again,
to get an idea of.
but I love that. Like I said, it's that whole like never giving up. Because when you get given a diagnosis like that, you still have a choice. Yes, stage 4. Yes, but terminal. But you still have a choice. What are you going to do? You're just going to sort of roll over and just accept the inevitable. Or actually, as you said there, you're going to live intentional. You're going to, well, what I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to go to an art degree. Well, cool, go and do it. Like, why would you not? Like, you're still alive right now. You've still got time to go and do it. And I love the fact that she did that, managed to get the bachelor's and then the master's degree in that time. Like that's obviously I didn't know her, but that's testament to the kind of person that she is actually to go and do something like that. Because that for me is probably the last thing on my mind going to education. But if it's something that's important to her and she wanted to do and tick it off a list, absolutely awesome. I love that.
Yeah, and that was. She was a force of nature for that, like and integrity. Like she would fulfill a promise. She made a promise, she would fulfill it, even if it was to her detriment. She would do it.
I think there's a lot of people that need to pay attention to that. There's not a lot of people in this world that don't live with integrity. So it's a big, powerful word that I love that. So at these 10 years, what was the quality of life like for those 10 years? Because again, thinking of my notes, I think, did you become her carer towards the end? Was the last treatment quite bad? Can you just talk to me a little bit about that before we sort of move on to where we're at now?
Well, the one question you always get as somebody in that position who's caring for somebody who has, that kind of illness or that kind of, situation is, well, how do you do that? How do you manage? And the answer is you manage day by day. You take care of what you need to take care of. And what was it? You do today's work today. There'll be plenty to do tomorrow, but you do today's work today. Don't try and do tomorrow's work today. And you deal with things as they come. And whether it was because the medication has almost more side effects than the actual condition, right? So, and the strangest one for her was where it was around food, because you have 3 weeks on, 1 week off. Almost all of these targeted treatments, you have 3 weeks on, 1 week off. And the 1 week off is your reset period. And you don't feel good the 1 week off. It's the week after when you just start treatment again that, you start feeling like you feel like yourself again. But what was weird is that every cycle had a different effect on her palate. So one cycle would be, 1 grain of salt too much. Oh my God, I can't touch it. It's too salty. But she could eat whatever she wanted as long as there was no salt. And then the next time it was, if it's even slightly greasy, no, I can't touch it. It'll make me ill on a dime, There was just so many kind of, or like one cycle ketchup's too hot, but the next cycle that's not a thing.
Mm.
So it was kind of figuring out. It was this weird adventure with food every couple of weeks, every few weeks, trying to figure out, okay, so what's it this time? And how do
It's
we
like a little lucky draw. You don't know until you've tried it. It's like, oh, like your favorite food and you can't have it anymore.
Yeah. Oh, at least until next cycle kind of thing.
But is that a good thing? It's like, even if it is something like your favorite food, at least it's like, okay, well, next cycle it'll be fine again. It's like you're not stuck with it. Yeah.
The only thing that was really bad was fish and chips, because when you have fish and chips, it's salty and
and greasy and with ketchup as well, all three.
And if a tartar sauce is a little too,
So,
so
what kind of stuff, when it comes to being a caregiver, then, like what kind of stuff does that sort of entail? Because, like I said, I think, like I said, people that kind of, as you sort of said, we said this off when we were chatting. People don't like to ask these sort of questions. Like, people kind of just kind of almost, I imagine, don't really know how to approach it. It's almost like the elephant in the room. But again, for me, it's better to have some information, because, again, statistically, people listening to this, like, the cancer is a real thing. And I think for me, it's better to have the information before you need the information. So can you sort of describe what it was actually like as you, the male partner, having to take care of the love of your life up until that moment? Like, what was that like?
So because it was targeted treatment, for the first few years, it was just kind of, okay, we have to deal with these effects, these side effects, and that's one thing. You deal with the fact that it is a gut cancer. There are times where they're going to be sick. Your schedule is constantly variable, because you want to make plans. You want to live intentionally. You go, okay, yes, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to do this. But you have to be incredibly flexible to be able to tell people, look, we are making plans, but everything is tentative. Everything is tentative, because day of, it could be, I'm not feeling well. I have no energy. Or it could be, I'm feeling great. And you also have to take into account that if you have energy that day and you're feeling good that day, if you overdo it, the next day you're going to pay for it. So you're always kind of, you kind of have to, life is about trade-offs, and you really kind of have to balance your trade-offs and your intention and all of that. And even for me, because as a caretaker, and this is the first rule of being a caretaker, you need to make sure that you're in a position, right? You need to take care of yourself, so that you can be in a position to take care of them. Because if you're cranky, irritable, feeling ill and whatnot, you're not going to be of much help to them, because they can't do for you the way you can do for them.
Can I just pause that? Can I just pause that and jump on this point? Because that's a real key point here. So a lot of people will feel selfish in that situation. Their partner's got cancer, they stage 4, going through all this stuff, and you're then saying, I need to sleep, I need to look after myself. I completely agree with you, by the way, because, again, like they say, you need to put your oxygen mask on first. Why do you think so many people struggle with this? And did you also feel that sense of guilt? Did you feel that sense of being selfish? Or did you feel any of that sort of stuff going through?
No, actually. I don't tend to feel that kind of thing. Honestly, I suppose if you want to make the Star Trek reference, I can be very Vulcan about such things. Very like, yes, but, and honestly, it's the advice that you'll be given. And, people will be like, no, but they come first. I'm not saying they're not important. I'm not saying, it's not you above them. That's the difference, right? It's a matter of, I need to make sure that I'm in a place where, look, even when you're a parent, right? And I'm not a parent, but I know this of parents. If you're not in the right headspace and those kids irritate you and you yell at them, that's causing more damage than, yes, if you take an hour away from the kids and kind of just go, I need some time to decompress and be me, and then I can spend 5-6 hours with the kids, versus, okay, got to deal with the kids. And then, that 5-6 hours or maybe the 7 hours with the kids is not good, because your headspace is just completely frazzled. It's the same thing with the caregiving. It's a matter of, you have to make sure that you're being there, and you're being there in the right way. That's the other challenge, is being there in the right way, because, at some point, like Sam, we had to come to an arrangement, because I would be like, let me carry that for you, or let me do this for you. And she's like, I'm perfectly capable. And I said, I realize you're perfectly capable, but I also know that that's a drain on your energy. And I know how that's going to play over the next 4 or 5 hours because I know you well enough. And I know that you're independent and stubborn. And I'm independent and stubborn. And I know how that's going to work. So, but we kind of came to an arrangement of, okay, I'm not going to offer the help, but I expect you to ask for it. Or to, so we actually had to kind of find that arrangement within our relationship to be able to have the space of, you may not want to ask for it because you are fiercely independent, but understand that I know what's going on. And there were points where I would be like, listen, I see this trend coming up. Do you agree? I see that if you do this, you're not going to have energy for what you need to do tomorrow. Do you want to do part of it, or do you want to go whole hog? But like, I see the consequences this way. Do you agree? And we kind of had that. The communication is wildly important there.
I think communication, that's what I'm saying. The thing there, the communication, that's such an important thing. Again, both on her part as well, because I think she had to communicate to you how she was feeling, because again, you can make a lot of assumptions and that doesn't get you anywhere. But I think you've hit a real key thing. I want to quickly loop back before we talk about the communication, because that's a big thing about looking after yourself. Like I said, when it comes to being a parent and all that sort of stuff, I think that is the key thing. The only thing you can control is yourself. And if you want to change external circumstances in your life, whatever that may be, you want your kids to behave better, you want whatever it is, the only thing you can control is yourself, and it's your thoughts and it's your actions. And if you're not actually taking the time to give yourself some space to, again, just deal with your emotions, because again, you'd have had emotions flying all over the place, what's going on. So you had to deal with that. So then it didn't come across as you said, you being snappy, you saying the wrong thing, or you being agitated. You deal with that in your own way, so you can show up as that better version of yourself. Again, whether it's you being a caregiver or you being a parent or you being a partner, whatever it is, you have to do that work on yourself, because the only thing you can control is you. So if you want to change the external circumstances, you've got to do, quote unquote, the inner work on yourself first. And then to loop back around again, that communication is such a key thing. And I think sometimes even what you've said there is to just ask the person, do you agree? So you're sort of saying, because you've got facts and you've got opinion. So what you gave there is your opinion. My opinion is this, and this. Do you agree? And then she's like, well, no, I don't agree. You can then have a conversation rather than an argument. And that's the key difference.
Well, also too, let's be honest. It's when you go to somebody and when somebody asks, how are you? We have the social nicety of, oh, I'm fine, thanks. How are you? There's the social nicety answer. There's the honest answer of, well, I'm not really feeling that bad. But when you constantly put it on them to kind of do the work, like, how are you? It's like, so you have to kind of be specific. It's, I notice you're grimacing here. What can I do to help? Or if you get more specific, if you know them well enough, especially, and because your partner, as much as this is kind of the ideal, we don't read minds. We can get very good at, our partner's patterns, but we don't read minds. So you can go, you can turn to your partner and say, I'm seeing this, am I right? Because then it takes the onus off of them to go yes or no. It's easier for them, take a little of the stress off of them. And one thing I will say to your audience, please, if you know anybody with cancer, it doesn't matter who it is, please don't ever turn to them with the pitying look and go, how's your health? How are you doing? Because I guarantee you, and I heard this ad nauseum from not just Sam, but a bunch of people from the retreats and whatnot that Sam had been on, and they want to slap your face off. They are so sick of that, the pitying look and the how's your health? It's like, or how are you doing? It's like, if you really want to know how I'm doing, ask me like a rippers. Ask, how you doing? Right? Like, let's level here.
But actually want to know the answer.
Yeah.
Because I've got cancer. You're asking me how I'm doing. Do you actually want to know the answer? Or are you just trying to make niceties? Because I'd rather you just not make niceties to me and just kind of, because that's going to say to you like that, because that's the thing that people, this is what I'm trying to get at before, is that people kind of step on eggshells. They see their friend, or again, maybe not even like a close friend. They've got cancer. They don't know what to say. They don't know what to do, and they make it very, very awkward. So can you sort of like I know, again, it was a good few years ago, but can you kind of take yourself back there? What is, I say like the etiquette, but what's the best way to handle it? Like I said, it's a great point that you made of like, just actually own your question. But is there any other way people can handle it? Or is there any things that you noticed that people did that just kind of made something uncomfortable, or they were just a bit, because people get weird around it. And I understand it, especially if they've not been through it themselves. So what would you say that you learned through that people could take from that?
I'm going to add to that because the exact same thing applies to somebody who's grieving a loss, whether it's their spouse or whatever. We get the same kind of awkward. I swear it is the exact same.
Thank you for adding it on. Because again, because we're talking about grief as well. So I'm glad you clarified that. Yes, yeah. So please, yeah.
Honestly, stop pointing out the elephant in the room. We know it's there. Just be a person. Be there. Don't focus on that. Focus on anything but. If you want to ask a question, ask a question. Never be shy to ask a question. But be there as a friend. Be there as a family member. Be there as somebody who's there for the person and not asking because of the condition, whether it's the grief, whether it's cancer, whether it's an injury or the best thing you can do is give them space away from it. And be open. If they want to talk about it, great. If you have a specific question, by all means, ask it. But, here's the thing. Our society gets funny about these things. Like you said, we all get very awkward about it. Little kids will walk up and say, why do you have no hair? Do we get offended? No, of course not. Why? Because they're being direct, and we appreciate directness. Is it blunt? Maybe. Is it hurtful? No, they don't mean it hurtfully. How could they? I think, and I can't speak for everybody, but I can say that anybody who lives with intention, even a little bit, will appreciate that directness, will appreciate that honesty of, I want to know this and I will ask.
And it's your intention behind it. Because why do you want to know? Do you want to know to be a gossip? Or do you genuinely want to know? Because it's like, listen, Samantha I didn't know her that well, but actually I saw what you guys gone through. And again, you're a good friend of mine, Richard. So it's like, so you ask him because your intention's good, not because, I've realized that he's just lost his wife now. Let me just get some gossip so I can go and talk about it at church or do you mean at this local supermarket? I think what's your intention behind it. And I think that's what you're talking about there is when you are asking directly with the right intention, you're not going to offend anybody because they can see the intent is good and pure. Now, again, you might not be in the place to hear that. And obviously then that's something you've got to work for and you can communicate that yourself. But I think actually be direct like that. I don't think that's ever in any situation. I don't think being direct with good intention is ever the wrong way to go about something.
Well, here's an interesting example. When I worked as a trainer for Apple for 8 years, and a couple of colleagues that I worked with were blind. One was legally blind, one was completely blind, right? And I was an accessibility expert, so I had to know how the features worked. But I know a little bit of the experience because I'd done some training for this, but I don't live it every day. So I had no problem going up to one of my colleagues, the one who was completely blind, and saying, hey, what is this experience like for you? Or how can this be done better? Or, and I would ask him straight up, and there was never any animosity. In fact, to the point, we had such a good rapport with each other. We had such a good relationship that we would joke about, the fact that he was blind, and we joked. And at one point, there was a manager who overheard us, and he goes, "You can't say that." And the employee who's blind turns and says, "Of course he can. We're friends. I know he doesn't mean anything ill by it, and he knows I don't mean anything ill by it." So, simple jokes like, "I'll see you tomorrow." It's like, no, you won't. It'd be like, we would laugh at that. Why? Because we had the rapport, because we knew that there was no ill will, because we knew the intent. The intent was just that, that camaraderie. And yes, he would joke about certain things with me, and that's fine. We were good with it. So it really is that, again, your intent is highly important, especially when you want to get into these questions. And there's nothing wrong with being direct and asking. And if they're uncomfortable answering, it's for them to tell you.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. I can't remember for the life of me what the joke was, but I had a ex-soldier who lost his leg, and he's now a soccer player, like amputee footballer. And then he got me in touch with another amputee. But he's got I can't remember what disease he's got. But basically he's in a wheelchair. So I was chatting to him. So he was the UK's strongest disabled man. So when I started to interview him, he made a joke about Mark having one leg. And I was a bit shocked. And then he's like, "What are you getting offended for?" He kind of caught me straight out, and he says, "We're mates. We joke about it all the time." He's like, and it's the first time, and you're talking now about 2 years ago doing the podcast with them. and it's complete. I just wasn't expecting it. And he went, "This is how we sort of, that we have a laugh and joke about it." And I think nowadays people are too snowflakey with stuff to get offended too easily. And it's like, come on, if someone's intentions are good, and they're not doing it maliciously, like right there, you knew full well your job was to help blind people with this this Apple thing. Cool. So why would you not ask the questions? Like it's for me, it just baffles me. People just I completely agree.
And let's be honest, you want dark humor. I love dark humor. You want to see the worst dark humor ever? Go to a cancer retreat. Nobody does dark humor like cancer patients.
But isn't it so funny because people get offended for people? Right. It's like, who are you getting offended for? So there's a comedian called Daniel Sloth. I don't know if you've heard of him. So he's a UK comedian. And basically he's very, very, very smart. So his jokes are very well constructed, but it's very, very dark humor. And he was talking about disabilities. And there's this whole joke about his disabled sister. And basically kind of stopped halfway and went, who are you getting offended for? It's like, how dare you get offended for my sister? You didn't even know her. And he kind of goes on this massive thing about it's me and my sister. Like, why are you getting offended about me telling these jokes and these stories? And again, it's really well constructed. And I'm probably butchering it, but the whole point of that was he was basically saying like, why are you getting offended? Like,
right?
Like it's a joke. Like when she was alive, we used to have great laughs and joke about it. Stop getting offended for her because you didn't even know her. And it kind of puts it back. And his whole thing is like, my job as a comedian is to just sort of delicately balance you through this sort of minefield of jokes. But yeah.
Well, and look, I'm a comedy aficionado, so you get the roller coaster effect, and nobody illustrates this better than George Carlin. Where if you go to the middle of his act, what he says, it can be kind of extreme, but when you watch the whole act, he takes you on this roller coaster. He takes you up nice and slow, and then when he starts, the more racy stuff, you're already in an agreement frame with him. You're already like, yes, I'm following everything you're saying. Yes, I agree with everything. And then the more you agree, the more you want to agree. That's simple, it's a simple agreement frame. But the fact is he can go more and more outlandish as the show goes on, and that's part of the fun.
Mm-hmm. And especially, I said, for me, listen, if you can't laugh about stuff, like you said on the cancer retreat, if you can't laugh about it, like what have you got left? You just there, just give me in a pit of misery. Like again, yeah, right. I completely agree. So can we then sort of like fast forward a little bit?
Yes, of course.
I'll say fast forward a little bit. When Samantha finally passed,
yes.
How did you feel in that moment? Now, what I mean by that was there a sense of relief, happiness, joy? Obviously, there's going to be sadness, but obviously, someone that you've seen, quote unquote, suffering like that, going through that. How was that for you? Like the actual when she actually passed?
I'm going to say something that might offend some of your audience. It was a gift. I say that now, the context of that. This was a gut cancer, which means that they look at her midsection, right? But it went to her brain, and they were like, well, it never goes to the brain, so why would we look there? It never goes to the brain, it never goes to the brain. And yet it went to the brain. So not only did they have to go in and do brain surgery and resect that tumor, but then it got infected. So they had to go back in, clean up, resect a little more, and kind of start the process over again. And this is where this was the beginning of the end. It's when there was a brain bleed that indicated the fact that there was a tumor there. So they had to do that very, very quickly. When it got infected and they had to go back in, you have to be on antibiotics. And the type of antibiotics that work on the brain, of the type that she was on, you can't do the cancer treatment and the antibiotics because they cancel each other out. So this leads to a very interesting scenario of you have a choice. Not really much of a choice, but you have a choice. We can heal the brain, but the cancer runs rampant. And this is going to be for a period of about 6 months. So you're not talking like, oh yeah, it's a couple of weeks. No, 6 months. So you've got 6 months of antibiotics where the cancer runs rampant, or we treat the cancer, but you literally will lose your mind progressively. It will actually affect your brain, and you will lose your mind. Well, there's no real choice there. You go, cure the brain. But that, look, I understood the medicine. I understood everything that was happening. I could have written out a checklist of exactly what processes and how it went. Again, I can be very Vulcan about these things, right? So, but I understood the processes, and I had to, while that was happening, first of all, I had to really put that, I have to take care of myself first, because if I'm not in peak state, or if I'm not in a state to help, we're screwed, because I'm the only one around, right? And that's not to say her family wasn't around. Her family was, but they weren't day
They
to
weren't
day.
living it day to day.
They
Yeah,
weren't living near
I
her.
get you. I
It
get you.
wasn't day
I
to
get you.
day. Now, I will put a caveat on that. Her cousin was amazing. After the surgery, she went and lived with her cousin. Actually, we both went and lived with her cousin for a little while she started recovery. And like they were amazing with her and with me and all of it. And we really did, it was really about her. And I have to give them mad credit on that one.
Mm.
But the fact is that, there's a point at which we had to go home and this is, our day to day and that's kind of what it is. So, you have to kind of, you kind of see how it's going and you kind of go, okay, I see where this is heading. I know this is happening, whether, one way or the other. It's just a matter of timeline. So I have to kind of start already kind of imagining a life where it's like, okay, now I understand that there will be a life without her, that I kind of have to start reimagining or figuring out life without. Right. And that's not to be mean. It's not to be, again, it was just a matter of scale, but I knew it was happening. And there's no way around that because I understood a lot about what was going on. So it's a matter of, I kind of pre-grieved, I guess, or anticipatory grief. They call it anticipatory grief. I had a lot of anticipatory grief and kind of, okay, this. And there's still a lot to deal with once her body kind of gave out. But to be fair, I lost parts of her as we went. So when the day that she died, she was not the best friend and the person I married and whatnot. Don't get me wrong, there were still very small parts of her there, but she wasn't the same person at all. Not physically, not mentally, not, in any way that I would recognize. But I was still, obviously I'm still going to be there for her and whatnot. So the day she died, it was a relief. It was a matter of, she would never have, if you had gone to her in her 20s and said, this is going to be your fate, she would be like, pull the plug, take a gun, shoot me, whatever you got to do. I will never live like that. That is not who I am. That is not how I am.
Mm.
So to know that she wouldn't have to kind of degrade anymore, to suffer anymore, and the indignity of not being able to have that full passion or that full life or that, life of the quality of life.
Mm.
Because for us, life is always about quality, not quantity.
Mm. I think that's again, I didn't know that part of the story either, and I'm glad that I stopped you when we had that first visual chat. So like I said I want to be real and raw on this. I cannot imagine being faced with that choice that you were given, like the two. Obviously, I think my thing would be obviously you want to cure the brain, but
yes,
like you said, it's what do you do with those two choices? Do you mean it's like it's? Do you mean what kind of choice is that? And I think, like I said, what we said that anticipatory grief is a big thing as well. Like I think people don't actually realize, and again, I also think people feel selfish doing that as well because the physical body is still there. But I think to your point, like my view on what we are is that we are spiritual beings in a physical body, and once you kind of lose the spirit, you kind of lose yourself essentially. So again, Samantha towards the end, as you said, she wasn't her, but the physical body's still there. So actually, you're kind of like slowly grieving the loss of the essence of her essentially. But I think people will feel very guilty about that because the physical body's still there. Am I making sense with that?
You absolutely are. But let's be honest, that's a societal construct. It really is. It's we are so kind of conditioned to death is a bad thing. Death is a part of the cycle. There's no getting around it. It's an inevitability. So why are we so funny about it? It makes no sense whatsoever that we should be so kind of hung up. Don't get me wrong. Yes, we grieve. Of course we grieve. But that part of us has to kind of look and go, this is for me. Like the grieving part it's not for them. They're gone. They've moved on to whatever's next. Right? This is the funeral, the wake, the living funeral, whatever it is, that is for the people who are left behind. It's for people to have their closure and say their goodbyes and dealing with the aftermath, the paperwork, the things. And people get so hung up on their things. After Sam passed, I had a room, actually the room I'm in now, my studio, what is now my studio, was her office. And all of her stuff came in here. And I could tell you, not a single item in there was her. They all, they were all kind of associated. None of them were her. None of them would give me her back. So it's stuff. So you become much more, like we were very much about, the experience and whatnot. We would spend our money on a concert rather than, a new couch, or whatever.
No, I love that. I think that's like I said, it's been this thing when you were describing. I know we've done a real short summary of you guys getting together, but your relationship up until the point she got diagnosed seemed pretty incredible. It seemed like the very much like the kind of stuff you see on movies. And like I said, we didn't dive into it too much, but that's basically seeing what it was, and kind of what you said there, like going and experiencing life rather than just getting the latest iPhone or something like that. Like it seems to me like it was a real magical thing, which is why when like I said, you told me the original story, I was like, this hit me really hard. But obviously that wasn't the point of this podcast today. That was for me to understand. But like I said, by the way, I love how open you are to discussing this topic. Because I said we're really sort of going at this from an angle that I've not really discussed it before, and I'm really, really enjoying this. I say as much as you can enjoy talking about grief. I hope you know what I'm saying. So when it comes to life after death, yes. What made you want to start dating? How long after her passing did you start thinking about dating? Like, what did that kind of look like? Because again, this is obviously now your job and what you do now to help people guide people through this, to help widowers through this. But what did that kind of look like? I know, again, we're talking about generalizations here because everyone grieves differently, and I understand that. But I feel like, again, there's a lot of guilt around this. I feel like you said a lot of people hang on to the idea of, again, you still got to be faithful when they all this stuff. Can you speak to me through your experience with yourself and also other men that you work with about some of the sort of commonalities that you see about this?
Absolutely. There's a conventional piece of wisdom that make no major decisions for 1 year. There's a neurological reason for this. But let's be honest, no matter how much you'd like to think otherwise, there is a certain level of shock. There is a certain level of upset. Again, you lose part of your identity. You lose there's so much that you have to kind of deal with that making any major decisions, you're very liable to jump out of the frying pan and into the fire, right? Now, so as much stability as you can maintain is a good thing. Sometimes it's not our choice. We can't afford the house. We can't afford the, work. We just can't focus on work because brain fog is a thing, right? Especially under extreme stress. Brain fog could keep us from doing our job well and whatnot. And some companies are just not understanding. All of that aside, right? The things that we have to change because we must, not because we choose to. Try to limit your choices for 1 year. Try to keep it as stable as possible, just so you can reestablish some form of foundation under your feet so that you're not, again, jumping out of the frying pan into the fire. You're not going, okay, well, we're going to dump everything. We're going to sell the house. We're going to move, this, that, and then you find yourself alone, isolated, in a place you maybe can't afford now because of, changing interest rates or whatnot, or, whatever it is. You don't want to find yourself in a worse scenario. But so I waited the year. I figured that was good advice. I was going to. Now, it's important to note, this does not mean don't socialize. For God's sake, get out there, get together with your friends. If you have friends who have lost, get out there and get them out.
What if they don't want to?
If they say no, that's their boundaries, right? That's fine. But don't stop asking. And they will say no. They will say no a lot, but don't stop asking. The reason is because they're going to look for stability, but the worst thing is that they will pull in and isolate. And the worst thing you can possibly do, and suicide rates jump astronomically especially for widowed men. Mm-hmm. Yes, for widows, but for widowed men, it's bad.
Do you think that's because, again, I know this is massively stereotyping here. Do you think it's because men lack the ability to do basic fundamental things, meaning your cooking, your cleaning? Like women tend, it's very stereotypical here. So it's like when men are left by themselves, they kind of feel even more helpless because then I've got to learn these new things and they're a bit like overwhelmed.
I wouldn't say it's as much about the cooking and cleaning, because you can go to a restaurant and you can get food and whatnot. And that's fairly easy to take care of, right? And you can get help with all of that. That the day-to-day stuff is not so bad. What really crushes people is that, again, along with the sense of identity, you have the roles. So if your wife was in charge of the social calendar or keeping the house, or maybe she was the breadwinner, right? Well, you now have, your job used to be, your job description used to be 6 things. Now you're doing the job of 2 people, right? The job description just got doubled, if not more.
Especially if you're a parent as well. Even worse.
Especially if you're a parent. And then you don't have the luxury of grieving for yourself. You have to take care of the kids, and you have to find your time, make your time to grieve with intention. And that's really important. It's the intentional part. But as men, let's be honest, and I can generalize here, men want to fix it. It's broken. I want to fix it. I want normal. They'll do anything they can to get back to normal, but there is no normal. Normal is never going to look like what it did. And any semblance of trying to not deal with it, or anything that you do to try and kind of push it away, is going to come back and bite you in the ass. Sorry, I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news here, but there it is. So yes, you suddenly have to take care of the kids. You're suddenly responsible for everything else. If you had pets, if you had the mortgage that you used to have 2 people, if you had 2 incomes, the mortgage is now all on you. Everything is all on you. And we know as human beings, we get overwhelmed pretty easily when it's all of a sudden, there's so much more responsibility. There's so much more on us. So all of a sudden it becomes, now I've got to deal with that much more. And procrastination, it looks too big. It looks too, daunting. And the arrangements and dealing with, and not only that, the people who come out of the woodwork and say, I want to help, you don't know. You don't know how to direct them. You can't say, yeah, okay. It's usually going to be little stuff like, okay, great. Can you pick up so-and-so and give them a ride back from the funeral? Or can you take the kids for like 2 hours so I can just have a few minutes?
I think that's the key thing you mentioned there, is that if this again, linking back to another episode I did, I can't remember when it was or who it was with, saying that in a situation like that, don't ask what you can do. Just look at some stuff and be like, right, I will take the kids for you. I will cook you dinner tomorrow. I will do this. Because again, you're not in a place to really think. So actually, if you know someone that's grieving and going through some loss like this, like, the basic stuff, like go and mow their lawn. Just go and do some stuff that they probably hadn't even thought about, just to actually be there. Rather than asking, just go and do, because you kind of know what it is anyway. No one's going to apologize. So no one's going to say no to you just rocking up and be like, listen, I've cooked your lasagna for the next 4 nights for you. No one's going to apologize and say, like, so the people can be like, oh, what, thank you. Even if they don't want it or need it, they're still going to take it because, again, everyone loves lasagna. But little things like that, it's just go and do it. Like, just do it. I just want to quickly link back to something you said there. You said grieve with intention. What does that mean, and what does that look like? Because again, I love that, but how do we do that?
Oh, and it varies slightly for each person, but basically the idea of I'm not going to try and mask it. And again, very important, drugs, alcohol, not taking care of conditions like diabetes or things that can, or gout, or things that can get worse, for God's sakes, avoid those as much as you can. But the idea of taking some time, going for a walk, finding yourself again and going, okay, that was then, this is now, who am I? And what do I choose to take on? What is life now? And really intentionally coming to grips and, coming to terms with what your reality currently is. And if there's something you don't like about that, that's okay. You're allowed to not like the situation, but acknowledge it and go, okay, now how do I engineer my life to be, or how do I engineer it so that I don't have to deal with, we had a puppy. Sam had quite insisted that we get a puppy the year before she died. So we had a 1-year-old puppy. And honestly, the way I work, the way the schedule I keep and whatnot, I was not going to care for that puppy in the proper way. I was not going to be able to train it the right way. So I found a good home for it. And I really did. I found a really, really good home for him. But that's because I knew that I would not benefit that life. Right? That was not going to be correct. We also had a cat. The cat is still, the cat sleeping in the other room, That's fine.
Cats are low maintenance. Cats are low maintenance there.
This one is particularly low maintenance, and he's a fantastic cat. And but I've never been one for pets. I could be just fine without them. But yeah, okay, the cat's great, you know. But the fact is that yes, cats are low maintenance, and then there's I'm very grateful that my cat is as low maintenance as he is, and you know, still when I come back, he comes to cuddle me and whatnot, and that's great. But these are things that you have to kind of consider, and you really have to take your time and get in your own head and or get out of your own head, go for a walk and start going, okay, start taking inventory, start figuring out what is, what do you want, and who have you become? Embrace the best parts of what that relationship made you, what the loss, you know, what adversity have you suffered that has made you better? What have you learned? Who are you now? Because you are not the same person you were when you met. You're not the same person as you were three years in. You're not the same person as you were, you know, however many years, you know, whatever anniversaries, you're not the same person.
I think that's a real key thing you've said there. There's a real key thing about you aren't the same person. So you're going to got to figure out, well, actually, what's this relationship given me? And it's like, just take inventory, because people don't do that now. Even like now, again, if you're in a relationship or whatever, just take inventory right now. Like, actually, how have I grown? Like, how's my partner helped me? Like, what have they brought to? And again, actually, just asking yourself that, like, I guess the big thing to try and get out to my clients: who do you want to become? So, kind of the way that I'm imagining this right now is it's almost like a clean slate, like, because it's like you're now back to yourself, like you're now alone, like you don't have that partner that there potentially was your rock, your everything, right? You're now standing on your own 2 feet. What do you want your life to look like? Yeah. And then, like I said, you can kind of just go from there, just small, steady steps and build it up. But what does that dating actually then look like? Because again, I think this is a big scary thing, especially for guys. Again, the older guys get, like, it's a scary thing. Like the dating world has completely changed, I imagine, in 20 years. So where do you start with yourself, and where do you start with clients doing this? Because like I said, so you don't do anything for a year. You kind of just resettled. You kind of figured out where you kind of at. You kind of figured out what you kind of want. Now, obviously, I'm going to imagine that the goal isn't just go out and get yourself a new wife straight away or a new girlfriend. I imagine that there's got to be some, like, so what does it kind of look like? What's the process look like just to manage people's expectations?
Well, here's the big question that, you know, comes up all the time for widows and widowers and all of, you know, and even people after divorce. It's like, how long, you know, when am I ready? How long do I have to wait? And the answer is time has nothing to do with it. Time has absolutely squat all, because it depends on where your mindset is. If you are seeking a relationship to fill a void, no, you cannot fill the void in yourself with somebody else.
Can I just pause that? That goes for anybody in any relationship, whether it's divorce or grief. Like, again, if you've just come out of a relationship, even if it's just a normal relationship, you've been with your girlfriend, boyfriend for 3 years, do not try and fill that void with another person, because that is one of the biggest things that I find people do. So I just want to nip in there, because people do that, forget divorce and forget grief. People just do that and try and fill voids, and that's all they're doing. They're not actually addressing the void. They're just trying to fill it, and it never, ever, ever works. I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I tried to jump on that, because people do not realize what they're doing with that, and it just never works.
But I love that you're reinforcing that point. I absolutely love that you're reinforcing that point. And the fact is you're right, it never works. So when you're looking for a relationship, it has to be because, and your life doesn't have to be perfect, right? We all know there's no perfect time, because life is always going to throw stuff at you. But you seek a relationship to share a life. Do you have enough space in your life to take on another person's narrative, another person's story, another person's life? And the relationship is not about they complete me, it's about we walk the path together, because we share values, because we share. And here's the biggest trick with relationships is, and what I do with people is, first question, after we establish, yes, you're ready, you've got the mindset, you understand time is precious, and that you want to do more with the time that you have left, however much that is. And then it's, and I've lost my train of thought. But no.
I do it all the time, don't worry, but my audience is used to that from me, so you're right.
Yeah, right. But the idea of, yes, I want to share a life. So what does a good relationship look like is the first question. Mm-hmm. What does a relationship look like? And that is, because most people can't answer that. Because the problem is you ask somebody what they want, they'll tell you 100 things they don't want. But trying to figure something like that out by deduction, and that's what happens with most people, right? This is where somebody like me comes in. People don't look at what a good relationship looks like. Who are they now? This idea of who have I become? And because our society, there's a quote I love. It's, in a society that profits from your self-doubt, liking yourself is an act of rebellion.
Yep. Could not agree more. Couldn't agree more.
So we are so programmed to kind of, I don't know if I go so far as self-loathing, but to doubt ourselves constantly. And to some people, it goes to the extent of self-loathing, and that's where you get your anxiety and your depression and your,
low self-esteem, low self-confidence. Yeah,
right. And so all of a sudden now it's a matter of, okay, so who have I become? What does a good relationship look like? Who have I become? What am I looking for? Like, what is my idea? What does an ideal partner look like? Now that we know what a good relationship looks like, because if you can't answer that, you can't answer what am I looking for? And you have to go deeper. And especially for those who have lost, we know that we're good in relationships. We know that a relationship works for us. We know that we can partner well. It's not like we were ousted because of something wrong. It's, so that's kind of a big part of the trick is, okay, great. Now that we know this, okay, now where do we go from here? Right. And then it's a matter of, okay, before you get on a site, before you even look at that, if you know who you're looking for, if you know what you're looking for, that'll determine which site you get on. Yeah. And then you need a good bio, because the fact is that a good bio and good photos that present the authentic you. We don't want to set these crazy expectations of these, great, crazy dates where it's like, oh, I'm going to take you to, the finest restaurant in town and this and that, because that's not who you are. Don't get me wrong. It's a nice thing to celebrate. It's a nice thing to do once in a while, but that's not how you want to open.
As also the photos, by the way, is a very funny thing, because again, especially again for like for yourself, for example, if you're putting photos from you 20 years previously when you were last single, that's not going to wash, because again, unrealistic expectations. And I found a funny thing. My dad listens to my podcast every now and again, so I don't know if he's going to be listening to this one, but my dad's LinkedIn profile was hilarious, because I saw his LinkedIn profile and there's a picture from him when he still had dark hair. I'm like, Dad, you've aged like 40 years. Like, that is like, you're basically catfishing people with your LinkedIn profile. You need to change it. It was actually Katie, my girlfriend, that spotted that, and it was hilarious. But again, I think it's a real key thing you put there, like, just be authentic, like put genuine, especially when we get into, again, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, 60s, like people are looking for something completely different. They want real, they want authentic, they want genuine. They don't want you to have airbrushed abs. They don't want any of that stuff. They want you to be actually real and authentic. And
let's be honest, there's another trick with the bio, and this is the secret, right? And the secret's on, I'll give you the secret sauce. How you do it is a little more tricky, but when you go on a dating site and you're looking for something serious, your profile has to make you a beacon for the people you are looking for. You have to be your own lighthouse. You don't go on a dating site and it's not a catalog. You don't go, ooh, that, let me order that. If you want a mail order bride, that's a whole other thing, but that's a whole other kettle of fish, my friend. If you're looking for something serious, you want to stand out to the people. So you want to be, okay, I'm interested. These people look interesting, but when they go and check out your profile, and they will, do you stand out and go, wow, no, that's somebody I want to meet? And that's the trick, is stand out on your own terms. Wedding crashers. I forget which rule it was, but stand out, but on your own terms.
Yeah. But this is interesting, isn't it? People are afraid to stand out. And people, and I think it's interesting. Would you recommend in this situation? Because I feel like men are terrible at this in the first place, especially if there's still, because again, there's still going to be some grief going through there, and there's still going to be a bit of uncomfortableness, like dating and again, being intimate with women. I fully get that. Would you say getting a friend to help you write the bio, like a woman, is that a thing you recommend, or like getting to look over it? Like is that something, yes or no?
I actually have a format, and it works. It works thunderously well. No, I find that getting somebody else to help you write a bio, it has to be authentic. It has to be really you. You need somebody, if you're going to get somebody to help you. You need somebody who's really good at wordsmithing, who's really going to work with you, but make sure that it sounds like you, that it is you, that it is authentically you 100%. Because again, you don't want that disconnect when you hit the point of chat, and all of a sudden it's like, you have this wonderfully well-written bio, and then it's like, yeah, I like basketball. It's like, okay, what else? It's like, I like basketball. That's your chat, man. Red alert, red alert.
But isn't it interesting though that people, like I said, it's because for me, I genuinely because again, I think back to all the dates I've been on, and in the past, there was even asked that because I have had in the past female friends of mine check over my bio to be like, would you be interested in me? Like, if you saw me, like, what stands out? So I didn't know if that was like because obviously, again, different generations here. Like, you're talking like, again, you're working people in their potentially 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. It's a very different sort of demographic.
The trick is, and let's cut to the chase here. Dating sites, it's marketing. It's marketing 101. It's you have to establish your brand, and is your brand, because marketing is how you ask for, or sorry, advertising is how you ask for the date. Marketing is why they'd want to, or your brand is why they'd want to go out with you, right? So great. What does your bio speak about you? And don't get me wrong, if I have a female friend and I ask, that's great, but they better be the type of person I'm looking for, because it may not appeal to them at all. I don't want it generic. That's another thing I get into. It's like, I'm looking for somebody with a great sense of humor. Who isn't? We all people laugh. Good God, what kind of sense of humor? Are you Three Stooges? Are you John Ritter? Are you slapstick? Are you puns? Are you into dark humor? Are you into, parodies? Are you into, they're all very wildly different. Are you into self-deprecating humor? That doesn't appeal to me, but it might appeal to somebody else.
So it's really knowing yourself then, like you said, like you've got to know yourself, and like, this is me. It's almost like you kind of like in 8 Mile. I think we just actually loads of time on the podcast, but 8 Mile, we get to the end and basically Eminem goes that rap battle. He basically tells the person about himself. But you're kind of doing that on a dating site in a constructive way, but like, here's me. Now, like, do you like it or not? But at least you're then open and honest, and you'll be like, this is me. Like, this is what I'm after. This is what I want. Like, I like this. I like this. I like this. I like this. I want this, and this. Do you want to come on board or not?
And talk to me about. Give them something to talk to you about. Right?
Talk to me about. Oh, I love that.
Oh, absolutely. Because, well, look, there's this old trick way back when online dating was earlier on. You had a lot of bots. You had a lot of things, fluffing the site, and, these chat bots, nothing like the AI we have today. But, so what would happen is you'd get these people responding, oh, hey, or the dating sites would actually hire one person to be like 30, 40 people, 30, 40 women. And, they would just kind of tease you to keep you on the site, because like a cab, they're not getting paid unless you're riding with their service. So they would, you'd have these catfish basically. So the trick was, you put in a profile something silly like, talk to me about, in your message, mention peaches. You eliminate most of the bots, and anybody who actually mentioned peaches actually read your profile and is interested enough to remember to use something distinctive.
Or like a subject thing, isn't it? Like, put it, if you've read this, put in the subject, like peaches. So
or even just mention it in your, mention it in your message, because if you mention it in the message, how creatively can they use it, right?
Yeah,
I'm a wordsmith.
Love that.
Yeah, but the thing of talk to me about, because that also tells a lot about you, right? The author, you can tell, you can tell as much about the author as the characters they write, kind of thing. So there's that.
No, I think that, listen, this is like dating gold just for people in general. And like I said, and listen, I could talk to you about this all day long, but that's it. Just sort of like wrap this up, because we've covered a lot of stuff here. And I said, just the dating thing is the bios and stuff is a real key thing, I think, because like I said, for me, it's just, you've got to do the work on yourself first in that year. Like you said, like, do nothing for a year. I think I've never heard that before, but it's a real key thing. And I'm taking myself back to when I was grieving. And again, it was a loss of an identity. It was a loss of an idea, like a safe place. And I look back now, and actually it has taken me roughly about a year to kind of get back to what I would class myself as full flow. And that wasn't even a person. So like I said, I completely agree. I've never heard that saying before, but I would 100% agree with that. Like, when you're grieving the loss of something hard, especially like the love of your life, you need to not do anything and kind of just do some internal work. If there's a guy listening, sorry, Karen.
You notice I use the widower's wingman, right? I really like, I love the term wingman, because let's be honest, I'm with you throughout the entire process, right? Because let's be honest, you are going to have those messages where you question yourself. You're going to have those days where, people don't respond, and you're going to have those low days, or you're going to need somebody to kind of go, is everything okay? Am I okay? Yeah, you're great. We're good. What's going on with this? What do you think of that? Bouncing ideas off random friends is fine, but the fact is, and I know I actually had somebody, well, why would I work with you? And I said, because the way you're going to go about it, you're going to jump on a dating site, you're going to have a few bad relationships, or worse, you're going to jump into a relationship with somebody who's going to take you for a ride. What you're going to figure out in 2 to 5 years, I can knock down to 4 months, and we're going to do it right from the get-go. So
but it's no difference though. Like just invest, and it goes for anything.
Yeah.
Anything, whether it comes to business, like this is why again I pay for mentorships. It's like, yes, I can go and read all this information online, but how many books have I got to buy? How many videos have I got to watch? Or I can just pay a mentor to guide me through the process. Like, and again, same with me, when people come to work with me, it's like, yes, you can do it yourself, but it's going to take you a lot longer. You're going to hit all the rocks. Whereas like, actually, I've gone through all this stuff myself. I can be your lighthouse. I can shine my light on the rocks and be like, don't crash into these rocks, and just navigate you through the journey. It saves you, as you said, it saves you years. When I go into schools, the first thing I say to kids is, I'm here to save you 15 years of your life. Okay, that's it. It's that simple. You can go do this yourself, but you're going to get to 30 years old and potentially hit rock bottom. I'd rather you not do that. Here's all the lessons that I've learned. Off we go. So like I said, I think it's a real key thing you've, again, alluded to. You've been full of gold nuggets this entire time. But like, why would someone work with a coach? Well, quite simply because we do the groundwork for you. Like, we're going to make sure you don't make the same mistakes we did. It's going to save you a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of heartbreak.
And you know what? I'll be straight up. Yeah, I made the mistakes. I got into a couple of relationships, and don't get me wrong, I'm still friends with them. I'm good with people, and I love, it's great to meet people, and I'm still friends with the people I met, or most of them anyway. But we weren't right, and I had to figure out that that's not what I was looking for, or I was wrong. And it's okay. You're allowed to be wrong, but that's where I know how to help you find what's right.
And I love that. Again, it's like, it's actually, and again, the women would appreciate that. The fact you're open and honest, you're not trying to string them along. Listen, this is what I'm looking for. Okay, great. Well, at least you're open and honest. Like, one of my best friends is someone that I met on Tinder, went on 1 date, 2 dates. And after that, I was very open and honest and said, I just don't think the relationship material. We're still best friends to this day. Like Katie's met and stuff, like best friends to this day. Because you just have the open honest conversation. It's like, you're not trying to string anybody on. So final question I want to wrap up with here. And again, I want to be very direct. Speaking to guys specifically, but again, it could be anybody. If we'll just go with guys, it's easier to make it more specific. What advice would you give to guys right now that do feel a bit stuck and out of control when it comes to navigating the dating world? What's one bit of advice you'd give them?
Honest to God, reach out. I mean, seriously, reach out to somebody who, there's nothing wrong. There's a stigma a lot of the time, it's like, oh, well, coaches or whatnot, well, I know how to do this. I'm not saying you don't, like we just said, yeah, you could do it on your own, but reach out. Even if you don't want to work with us for the whole thing, at least get some clarity and figure, reach out, find somebody who can help you get the clarity you need to kind of move in the right direction. Is it worth it? Yes. And yes, I work with a coach for business. And yes, I have, I'd honestly say reach out. And if you're really grieving, if you're having a hard time and it's not letting up, talk to somebody, talk to a professional. There's no shame in it. That's the most important thing we have to remember. We're all just people. We're all people trying to get by in a world that's getting increasingly crazy. That's getting crazier and crazier. The only currency we actually have that is worth anything right now is trust and integrity.
Yeah.
That's I've been saying that for years now, but we have hit the time where trust and integrity are the only currency that matter. So find somebody, use critical thinking, be sure, but find your people, find the people who will help you.
I love that. Richard, where can people find out more information about you? If they do want to work with you or reach out, what's the best place to contact you?
thewidowerswingman.com.
Perfect. Okay. Do you have any Instagram or anything?
Do I have any?
Yeah, do you have Instagram? Do you use Instagram at all?
I do. I'd actually have to. I think it's Widowers Wingman. Hold on. Let me double check that. I'm not on Instagram as often.
Also, so is the Widowers Wingman? Is the website the best way of getting hold of you?
The website is by far the best way of getting hold of me. But if you want to get me on Instagram, Widowers Wingman, all one word.
Amazing. I'll get Mikey to pop them up on the screen, and also I'll put the links in the show notes as well. Richard, thank you very much for your time today. Very much appreciated.